What's going on, everybody? Welcome into episode 134 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast on this Friday, January 9th, 2026. I'm your host, Zach Malum. But before we get started, please subscribe below. Follow all of my social accounts. Let's start things off in the world of basketball as the New York Knicks were in action on Wednesday evening. They hosted the Los Angeles Clippers at Madison Square Garden, and it was the Knicks who came out on top 123-111. The final, a slow start for a lot of players on this Knicks team, and they come back with a monster second half, over 70 points in the second half, and Jalen Brunson was the star of the show. 16 of his 26 came in the second half, 9 of 12 shooting, 4 of 5 from beyond the arc. Super efficient with 7 assists as well in this one. Karl-Anthony Towns also made a monster impact in the second half after starting off slow. Just 6 points in the first half, added 14 in the second half, finished with 20 points, 11 rebounds, and 7 assists. You really see the vision that Karl-Anthony Towns brings as well, moving the ball around, and the Clippers just did not have an answer in the second half for this Knicks offense. On the Clippers side, Kawhi Leonard was unstoppable in the first half. He had 21 points and was on fire. He finished with just 25 points, just 4 points in the second half of this game, and the Knicks did a great job of locking him down defensively. So the Knicks snap a 4-game skid, the first 4-game skid in a long time for this Knicks team. You got to go all the way back to the 23-24 season for the last time the Knicks lost 4 games in a row, and then even 5 games in a row was the year before that. So it really was a different scenario for this Knicks team, and they had to stop the skid of 4 games right there and then, and they do that before they head onto the West Coast, a West Coast trip, a 4-game road trip that they start tonight. A 9 o'clock start out in Phoenix tonight, and the Knicks come into this game as 1.5-point favorites, total sitting at 229.5. Gonna be a tough game for this Knicks team. Phoenix 22-15 on the year, but 12-5 on their home floor. A real bounce back from last year where Phoenix really struggled. But you look at Phoenix this year, 22-15, that's just 7th place in the Western Conference. Really shows you how tough the West is. And the Knicks have not been great on the road this year. 7-9 record away from home, 24-13 on the season. So a 9 o'clock start tonight. Make sure you tune in as the Knicks start a 4-game West Coast trip. It's not going to be easy for this Knicks team, but they do snap that skid against the Clippers, and it's looking like they have their mojo back just a little bit as they head out west for 4 games the next couple of days. But let's stay in the world of basketball, but move things to the world of college as the St. John's Red Storm took on the Butler Bulldogs on Tuesday night out at Hinkle Fieldhouse in Indianapolis, and St. John's really controlled things all throughout. 84-70, they get the victory. Zuby Ejiofor was the star of the game for St. John's. Real shocker there. He had 18 points with just 5 rebounds in this game, but he also had 3 steals as well as a block to add to his tally on the day. Bryce Hopkins was also strong down low. He had 17 points, 7 of 12 shooting, just 4 rebounds from him as well. Really didn't see a lot of impact on the glass just yet from St. John's in this game, but you saw the scoring ability of a lot of these guys. 84 points they put up after really struggling versus Providence earlier in the week, and a very tough loss that they had to come back from. And you look at Providence, and they kept it close versus UConn midweek this week, and that really tells you, okay, the Big East is a little bit open behind UConn. UConn's still probably going to run the table and really do a great job, Dan Hurley does, of getting his guys ready for Big East play. But you look at St. John's and Rick Pitino, they're trying to do what UConn is doing right now and really rolling right now through Big East play. That's exactly what St. John's did a season ago, really beating everybody in the Big East that they came up against. It's a different season right now for the Red Storm, and you could see that early on. A 3-1 record in Big East, but a 10-5 record overall now. St. John's continues Big East play tomorrow, a 2 o'clock start, taking on the Creighton Blue Jays out in Omaha. And yes, it's not the same Creighton team that you've seen in years past, but this is still a very, very tough place to play out in Omaha. And Creighton 10-6 on the year, 4-1 in Big East play. Not the same kind of mojo that Creighton has each and every year. An NCAA tournament team, really every year you look. Not the same kind of team this year. They lost a couple of big guys from last year in Ryan Kalkbrenner and then their star point guard in Stephen Ashworth. But you look at Creighton now, still a tough place to play. They still got some guys out there dealing with some injuries this year. But it's not going to be an easy game for St. John's. And even though St. John's may be favored coming into this game, Creighton's going to make it real tough against this Red Storm team. So we'll see what happens. Make sure you tune in 2 o'clock tomorrow. A very tough test for the Red Storm as they take on the Creighton Blue Jays out in Omaha. Shifting things to the world of football, as the New York Giants have been making noise this week looking for their next head coach after they fired Brian Daboll during the 2025 season. They also had Mike Kafka as their interim head coach. He completed an interview in the last week with the Giants, but unlikely, in my opinion, that Mike Kafka is back to be the head coach. They got a lot of names on the list of interviews. When you look at Kevin Stefanski being the main one, in my opinion, a great head coach, and what he was able to do out in Cleveland was phenomenal. 5 different starting quarterbacks a couple of years ago and still made it to the playoffs. A couple of playoff wins, and the first playoff win in a long, long time for the Cleveland Browns, as they got that with Baker Mayfield as his quarterback, if you remember, just a couple of years ago against their rival Pittsburgh Steelers. There's a couple more names on the list, though. John Harbaugh being one of them, actually fired from the Ravens job, and a guy who's really had a lot of experience in the NFL as a head coach. That should be a perfect name to go after in John Harbaugh. However, I do think it's unlikely that he comes to New York, considering the connection that he has with Stephen Ross down in Miami and the Dolphins firing Mike McDaniel once Harbaugh probably became available. That's really what changed the mind of Stephen Ross, the owner of the Dolphins, and he's looking for a head coach now. John Harbaugh would probably be perfect down in Miami for that. But when you look at the rest of the candidates behind Stefanski as well as Harbaugh, Raheem Morris being one of them, Giants need a lot of help on defense. And Atlanta was able to do some good things on defense. Weren't fantastic this year, and that probably costed Raheem Morris his job. But in the end, he's a real solid head coach as well. And then you look at the rest of the guys. Antonio Pierce is on the list. He's getting interviewed, as well as Mike McCarthy being one of the names. And that's an interesting one, in my opinion, because Mike McCarthy has his offense. He's worked well with a lot of different offenses in his career, including ones led by Aaron Rodgers as well as Dak Prescott. But you're looking for Jackson Dart's best scenario in a head coach. And I think that turns to a defensive head coach with an offensive coordinator being hired, and get an offensive mind in there behind one of these defensive-minded head coaches. I think when it all starts, you got to look at the defensive head coaches. That's really what it comes down to, and I think a lot of these guys that the Giants are interviewing comes down to defense. Their defense was horrible last year, a team that had high expectations on the defensive side, especially after they added Abdul Carter with the 3rd overall pick in the 2025 draft. They need to be a lot better on defense, and I think it all starts with a defensive-minded head coach. Then you add a offensive mind to it and allow Jackson Dart to do his thing with probably a lot of weapons next year. Of course, the injuries this year to Cam Skattebo as well as Malik Neighbors. Those guys will both be back next year. I don't know when, in terms of Cam Skattebo dealing with that dislocated ankle and then a fracture. He still has a probably longer period than Malik Neighbors does. But even so, if you get this offense rolling under Jackson Dart, as well as a new OC under a defensive-minded head coach, I think the Giants should be in a really good spot heading into 2026. But we'll see what happens. We'll keep an eye on it as the Giants continue to interview new head coaches for for their head coach opening for 2026. Let's finish things off today in the world of baseball, as there haven't been many moves by either New York team this offseason, but there has been a lot of noise in the last couple of weeks, starting things in Queens, where the New York Mets are still without an ace in their rotation. They're still relying on Nolan McLean, it looks like, from last year to be their number one guy heading into this season. However, he's surrounded by a lot of guys from last year's rotation that took a major dip after June 13th. When you look at the guys in Sean Manaea, Kodai Senga, as well as David Peterson, who avoided arbitration yesterday, that's not enough in the top end of this Mets rotation. There's still a lot of guys on the board and on the market in free agency. Framber Valdez, the starting pitcher from Houston, as well as Ranger Suarez, the starter last year in Philadelphia. Those two guys could be options for the Mets. However, you've seen in the past from David Stearns that he does not like long-term deals, especially in terms of his starting pitchers. And that's something that the Mets are going to have to really be content with this offseason, because those guys are holding out, in Suarez as well as Valdez. They may wait a little bit longer. They're not just going to jump into a short-term offer if they don't have to. I think the offers are going to start rolling in, considering it is January 9th now, and there is just over a month till spring training and pitchers and catchers start reporting to spring training. I think right now what the Mets are focused on is getting a guy at the top end of that rotation, as well as adding some bullpen arms after they lost a lot of guys already in free agency in that bullpen. Yes, of course, they added their closer in Devin Williams after a solid year with the Yankees last year, but they lost plenty in free agency. When you talk about Tyler Rogers going to Toronto, as well as Ryan Helsley, who goes to Baltimore, and of course the big one in Edwin Diaz, who lands with the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Mets still feel like they're in a good spot right now, especially with this lineup led by Juan Soto, who had a career year a season ago. However, they lost a lot of guys in terms of power in that lineup. Pete Alonso going to Baltimore. They traded Brandon Nimmo down to Texas. There's still a lot to be done for this Mets lineup, especially to get them back to where they were a season ago in terms of that power. The biggest name on the board right now is Kyle Tucker, who's still a free agent after a season with the Chicago Cubs. Of course, he was traded by the Houston Astros, where he spent plenty of seasons to start his career. A down year in the end, from the looks of it, by Kyle Tucker in 2025 with Chicago. 136 games, only had 22 home runs at Wrigley, and 73 RBIs, which is his second fewest in a long, long time. He had 92 in 2021, then 107 in 2022, finished off with 112 in 23, a down year in 24, dealt with injuries in his last year in Houston, but then 73 RBIs last year, just not good enough from Kyle Tucker overall. And you're seeing the market now for Kyle Tucker, a guy who last year, you thought if he went into free agency heading into this season, he would get Juan Soto type of numbers. That was the kind of contract that a lot of people were talking about. Of course, a down year with Chicago does not help that, and his numbers were not great, especially in terms of its average as well. 266, the OPS was 841, fewest in a long time, and this is a guy who's trying to get a longer-term deal. I don't think it's going to happen right now with how he played last year. Now going into his age 29 season, it's really unlikely that a lot of teams will give him that long-term contract. I think it's more so turning towards that short-term deal. And if that's the case, then the Mets are in a perfect spot to give Kyle Tucker the short-term deal that he's looking for. It's worked out for a lot of guys in the past. I mean, you could look quickly towards last year, especially with one Pete Alonso, who did not have a great year in 2024, then goes into 2025 and has a career year, was phenomenal for the Mets, and ends up inking a big-time deal with the Baltimore Orioles this offseason. The long-term deal, even with a guy heading into and already at the age of 30, still gets that long-term deal that he was looking for because of the production that he had on that short-term deal. So we'll see what happens with Kyle Tucker. I think the Mets are probably the best place for him in terms of a short-term deal. The question, though, is the Toronto Blue Jays, and they're willing to spend this offseason. You've seen that already. Will they give him a longer-term deal that he's looking for? I think Kyle Tucker is in a weird spot right now. Probably better off taking a short term and really getting his production up next year as he looks towards 2027 and that free agency period. That should be an interesting thing for Kyle Tucker. Still deciding what he's going to do, but a lot of time left for him to decide. January 9th, so you're getting towards spring training in about a month or so. He still has plenty of breathing room, though, in my opinion, and that should be interesting to see what happens with Kyle Tucker as well as the rest of the Mets rotation. On the other side of New York, the rumors are swirling as well in the Bronx as the New York Yankees have not done much this offseason. They've brought back a couple of guys from last year's team, including Trent Grisham, who they brought back on a qualifying offer back in November. Tim Hill, as well as Ryan Yarbrough, returned for the Yankees in the bullpen, as well as Yarbrough, who could be a back-end starter while the Yankees get guys back from injury, as well as they also had Ahmed Rosario return from last year's team, and he's a good utility guy to have in the infield while the Yankees deal with some injuries as well, especially to Anthony Volpe at shortstop. But the biggest name that's been coming up in the last week has had to do with Cody Bellinger, who's still yet to sign a contract in free agency, looking for a long-term deal right now, and he's just not getting the same offer that he was expecting heading into this free agency period, especially from the Yankees side. They're looking at probably giving him over $30 million per year, according to a couple of reports. But Bellinger is looking for 7 years, and I just don't think the Yankees are willing to do that, especially with a guy who could start to break down towards the end of his career. He's a great fielder right now, but that can go waywards at any time. And I think Cody Bellinger's bat is crucial to the Yankees next season. His lefty bat, especially with the short porch in right field at Yankee Stadium, definitely could help them out for next season. I think when you're looking at it, though, they should not give Cody Bellinger 7 years. I think that's just way too much, whether it's 5 or 6 years maybe, and they're probably even hoping for 4 or 5 in terms of Cody Bellinger. He's probably not going to take that, but that's probably the sweet spot for this Yankees team. I think 5 years is probably the best spot for the Yankees. If they're able to get that deal done, it should be good for the Yankees long term. Right now, though, it doesn't look like they're close with Cody Bellinger, and that's where the rumors have come on about Bo Bichette, the shortstop from Toronto, who's had a great start to his major league career. Really, really strong hitter and a guy who can really slot in at the top of the order for the Yankees, who have been looking for a top of the lineup guy for years and years since they got rid of Gleyber Torres. Of course, he went to Detroit last year. He really wasn't a true leadoff guy. They're looking for somebody to really step in and be that number one in the lineup. Of course, Aaron Judge right behind him, and then potentially Cody Bellinger, Giancarlo Stanton as well. Get the power guys up to bat after your leadoff guy gets on base, and that's something that Bo Bichette does very, very well. A very good hitter in terms of average. He batted .311 last year in 139 games with Toronto. After 2024 was a down year due to a lot of injury. Really bad average in the end, .225, but he only played 81 games. Real good bounce back in 25 with Toronto as they made it all the way to the World Series. When you look at Bo Bichette's numbers in 2025, though, 94 RBIs, his most since 2021, where he had 102, and that was a phenomenal year by Bichette, really his breakout year in Major League Baseball. He's really a solid hitter to have at the top of your lineup. That's something that the Yankees should look at if they cannot get a deal done with Cody Bellinger. But the biggest story with Bo Bichette is he's looking for a deal that's north of $300 million. And that's something that's just crazy in my mind. A guy who's going to be at the top of the lineup for the Yankees. However, $300 million for a number one hitter in the lineup when you're paying other guys in that lineup like Stanton and Judge these monster numbers in terms of their power as well. Bo Bichette only had 18 home runs last year, and that's probably the max that you're going to get out of him right now. Yes, he's going to be a solid defender as well, but you're looking at Bo Bichette turning now 28 in March, and he's going to head into his age 28 season, I think he's going to start to break down defensively, and you've seen that already in recent years. This is a guy who's probably going to play second base, third base, more so than play shortstop, especially if the Yankees continue to rely on Anthony Volpe at shortstop for years to come. So this is not worth the $300 million that Bo Bichette is looking for. However, if the Yankees do not get Cody Bellinger, they should definitely go after Bo Bichette because they do need that guy at the top of the lineup to set up for guys like Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton. The Yankees still have a lot of room to improve as well. Probably could add another guy in that rotation considering the injuries that they're dealing with. Carlos Rodon is still getting back from surgery. It looks like he could make it back for April, but if I'm the Yankees, I'm not rushing Carlos Rodon if I don't have to. Maybe May is probably a better option. Get him 100% healthy and do not risk an injury once again for Rodon as you head into a very crucial 2026 year with everything going on, CBA, and maybe a lockout in a couple of years. They cannot waste time as Aaron Judge is not getting any younger, as well as Garrett Cole, who's going to be back from injury, it looks like, in the month of June. I think they cannot risk those guys and the careers of those guys with just a down year in 26. They really have to step on the gas, in my opinion, and they have not done that so far this offseason. Still a lot of time in free agency as we look towards a month towards spring training. The Yankees still have a couple more things to add. It's crucial that they probably get a guy in Cody Bellinger to be in that lineup in terms of the power behind Judge and how well he played last year defensively, but also adding to that rotation is crucial for the Yankees in 26, and we'll see what happens. There's still a lot of time left in free agency as the Mets and the Yankees still making noise right now up in Queens as well as the Bronx. But that will do it for episode 134 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast. Please subscribe below. I've been Zach Mellon, but thanks for watching and talk to you all on Monday.